What is going on, YouTube? Joe here with Culination Media, bringing you another episode of CM Strats. Today we're looking at Frank, the hot dog himself, Arcanine from the UU tier, also perfectly viable in OU. Don't listen to the OU players that tell you that Arcanine is not viable because they don't know what they are talking about. And usually, well, not that they don't know what they're talking about. Shouldn't say that. Should not say that, but I will say that they are just a little bit stubborn. They're a little bit stuck in their ways, and they don't want to use Pokemon from other tiers. I've heard people say that Arcanine is a waste of a slot, blah, blah, blah. That's not the case. I've used it in OU high on the ladder just fine. But yeah, we can use physically defensive Arcanine, we can use specially defensive Arcanine, you can use offensive Arcanine. Arcanine has so many different uses. Today we're going to look at the set that I like to run and that I use in most of my battles, and that's going to be the specially defensive Arcanine, which I think is, I don't know if it's better than the physically defensive one, but I just happen to prefer it. So that's what we're going over today. Before we get started, if you guys can, if you would like to show some support to the channel and the series and all of that good stuff, all you gotta do is click that thumbs up button right below this video. It takes like 2 seconds and it does help out a lot. It really does. Of course, I appreciate it, and it tells me that you guys are enjoying the stuff and that I should continue doing it and all that good stuff. And don't forget to leave a comment also to leave your thoughts and let me know what you run on your Arcanine or what you think is the best, because this is not the best set by any means. It's just, I'm just showing you what I like to run. That's all it is. It's not that this is the most viable thing in the world. It's just for those that are either new to competitive battling or were just curious what I run on mine. That's what this showcase is about. So let's start from the top. We've got a Careful Nature, because that is minus special attack plus special defense. So you can still use your physically offensive moves, such as the ones that we carry on this set, and still be fine. If you want to use Flamethrower on the set, which is perfectly fine, and I'll go into that later, you can change the nature, but for now, we're just going to go with Careful. EVs, 248 HP, 252 special defense, and then the 8 that are left over, you can pretty much stick them anywhere. If you want to put them in speed, you could to outspeed other defensive Arcanines, or it doesn't really matter. I just stick them in attack to give a little bump in power to extreme speed and flare blitz. Doesn't really matter, like I said. The 248 is to make sure that you are getting a stealth rock number so you can switch into stealth rock more times. You want to have an odd HP number, especially when you're weak to rocks like Arcanine is, which is one of its biggest downsides is the defensive walls. Fire types generally don't make the best defensive walls because they're weak to fire, but certain ones can do it, like Arcanine and even Heatran. But that's OU. We're talking about UU. Now, the item of choice is the lefties. If you're running physically defensive, you could go for the Rocky Helmet as well. Perfectly viable, but I think that the extra passive recovery each turn with the lefties is much more useful, so that's why I tend to use the lefties here. The ability, defensive Arcanine always runs Intimidate. You could run Flash Fire if your team really needs an immunity to fire, but generally if you're looking for something that's going to resist or be immune to fire or whatever it may be, you probably should be looking in other areas as opposed to giving it to a defensive Arcanine, which really isn't the best thing to do. The only reason I could suggest doing that would be if you're going into OU and you're really worried about the Sharp and you don't want to switch in and give it a Defiant boost with the Intimidate lowering its stats, but even then you can still Will-O-Wisp and you're faster, so I don't really see it being that useful. So Intimidate is the ability of choice. Now we're going to go into the moves. We've got Extreme Speed, which is 80 base power. Great neutral coverage. Unfortunately, it does not hit Ghost, Steel, Rock types, but still pretty darn good coverage there. Plus 2 priority, which means you'll even be outspeeding, you know, the fastest Talonflame Brave Birds in OU. The only thing you won't be outspeeding is other faster extreme speed users. We've got Morning Sun, which is your main form of recovery. Unfortunately, it only has 8 PP, even when it's maxed out with a PP max or PP ups or whatever, so you can't just use it all the time. I suggest using it a little bit more conservatively unless you don't plan on having Arcanine stay around for a while. But if it's your wall, you would think that you'd want it around. That's another reason why I say Leftovers is a better item, because sometimes it makes it so that you don't have to use Morning Sun nearly as much. Now, we also have Flare Blitz, which seems kind of strange to have a move that is going to cause recoil on a wall. But it is Arcanine's best bet from a physical standpoint of dealing stab damage. That's why I said if you want to change the nature, you could give it Flamethrower. But I feel like Flare Blitz is a little bit better, and I would rather have the extreme speed on there too. So Flare Blitz just works better in my opinion for the way I use Arcanine. It may not work that way for you. The recoil may prove to be too much for the way you use it, so feel free to replace it. But if you're looking for other physical fire type stab, you're really not going to find it unless you want to stoop all the way down to, I don't know what the next one would be, Fire Fang maybe? Even still, that's not that good. And then the last move in the set, you could run a couple of different things. I prefer Will-O-Wisp because you're specially defensive. You're not going to take physical hits as well, even with the Intimidate. So things that you outspeed, such as Tyranitar. Even with an Intimidate, a Stone Edge coming off a stab Tyranitar is going to hurt. But you can neuter it essentially with the Willow and then Morning Sun off the lesser amount of damage that you would take from Burn Tyranitar. So that's pretty cool. I just think that Willow is the best. I really, really do. You can opt to go for Toxic here if the extra added residual passive damage is more important, or if you're trying to wear down walls that need to be toxic and not burned because these, 12% each turn that they lose is just not enough. You can go for the Toxic. You can also opt for Roar here if your team needs a phaser. It works especially well if you're using teammates such as Roserade to set up spikes, or if you already have rocks up, or even toxic spikes to start spreading poison throughout your opponent's team. That can work out really well. Also, just keep in mind that Roar, you can't just continually spam it because it has negative priority, and you're going to eventually have to heal up with Morning Sun, and if your opponent has some physical attackers, you're not intimidating everyone as they come in, and you can't burn them because you don't have the Willow. So that's something to keep in mind, unless you wanted to forego the extreme speed. But the priority is especially useful, especially in OU when there's priority all over the place, and having +2 priority to out-prioritize other priority users. I said the word priority so many times in that sentence. But you know what I'm saying. The +2 priority of extreme speed, which, out-prioritizes Water Shuriken, and which is not common, but Brave Bird, things like that. That is very, 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 very useful. So that's pretty much what I wanted to go over. Now, we can go over some teammates. Obviously, the first thing I want to mention is that a Water Fire Grass Core is always fantastic. They just have very good synergy together as, typings are concerned, because between the three of them, you usually have something that you can switch in to take different attacks, and the resistances and weaknesses do complement each other very nicely. I already mentioned Roserade as a decent partner for Arcanine and UU, because also if you're running Roar, it does help out because Roserade has access to all kinds of hazards and toxic spikes and those kinds of things. But also Roserade can usually switch in on water type moves. It depends on what it is, and obviously you don't want to switch in on a Dragon Dance boosted Waterfall or Crab Hammer from a Crawdaunt, because that's still going to just deal a buttload of damage to Roserade. But you know what I'm saying. For the most part, any fire type moves that would be coming Roserade's way, Arcanine can switch in on. And Arcanine actually makes kind of a decent mixed wall here, because the Intimidate does really help it out. It does cause a lot of switches, so having Pokemon on your team that have the ability to set up hazards, be it spikes, toxic spikes, Stealth Rock is another one, that's going to rack up really quickly. And if you can keep hazards off of your side of the field, you're really going to start wearing down Pokemon that your opponent might not want you to start wearing down, if you catch my drift. So another big pro for having this Arcanine is that it can take out Steel types, and Steel types are a problem for a lot of Pokemon because Steel types have so many resistances Pokemon like Scizor, just, they only have one weakness. Just one weakness. Arcanine can really just poop all over Scizor, honestly. There's really not much that Scizor can do. It gets intimidated, you can burn it. Flare Blitz usually will one-shot it depending on, you know, if it's Mega or not. I'm sure if it has HP investment, I don't know if it can evolve, not evolve. Why did I say evolve? I don't know if it can survive. You can just calc that, I'm sure. But you get my point. Steel types are fairly hard to deal with, both in UU and OU, and Arcanine neuters a lot of them. And that's, to me, that's invaluable. When I'm building my team, Steel types are one of the first things that you think of. And Fairy types are another one. Amazing offensive typing. And Fire is one of the few types that actually resists it other than Steel. I don't know what else resists it. I guess Poison, but Poison is not a very common type. So having a resistance to Fairy typing is fantastic, especially on a specially defensive Pokemon, because you can switch in on those Moonblasts and those Dazzling Gleams, and Arcanine's really not going to take that much damage at all. You can start spreading your residual damage, start roaring out, whatever you're going to do. Pick off weakened Pokemon with extreme speed, heal up with Morning Sun. You have a plethora of options. Now another Pokemon that I found works really, really well with Arcanine, this spread specifically, is Slowbro. And I'm not big on the regenerator Pokemon because, there's just something that I don't like about, you go into UU and then the team that you come up against is Amoonguss and Alomomola, Tangrowth, Slowbro, like a whole team of regenerator stalling cancerous things. That's not what I'm talking about, but having Slowbro, it synergizes so well with Arcanine because Arcanine can take those grass type hits that are aimed for Slowbro. It can take dark type special hits fairly well. It can take electric type hits fairly well because you're fully invested in your special defense. Most of the time you're not going to get one-shotted. So it's a good time. And then on the other side of that, Slowbro can switch in on water type moves and ground type moves and rock type moves that are aimed for Arcanine, because even though Slowbro doesn't resist all of them, its defense is so high and has access to reliable recovery. It does have that regenerator, as I mentioned. Just a great partner, and there's a slew of partners that work well for Arcanine. So trying to think how I want to say this, but basically anything that synergizes well with Arcanine's fire typing, which is not that difficult to do, and has good defense on the physical side, usually one of those two things, or a combination of, will work well with this Arcanine build. So, and the reason that I really like this build, as I mentioned, probably, I don't know, a couple of times, is it's so versatile. You can just pick and choose which things you want to do, and in a lot of cases, sets like this and walls, you don't really have a lot of options on what moves you can run. You just kind of have to go with what works, and it's usually, you know, a pool of 5 moves or so. Arcanine has so many different options, even just for its stab. You can add the flamethrower in, you could leave the flare blitz, you don't have to have extreme speed. Really, the only thing that you need to have on the set is the Morning Sun. Everything else can be switched out for something, depending on how you want to run this Arcanine. So, just because you run into an Intimidate defensive Arcanine does not mean you know what it's going to do. And you can use that to your advantage. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. I've repeated myself several times. I kind of tripped over what I was going to say because there's just so much, and I'm very excited to share my Frank the Arcanine because I love this set. As always, I'm sure I will have a video in the description of Arcanine putting in some work. I usually do something like that because I can't put it in the video every single time. People were commenting before on one of the other videos of, you can't expect people to read the description, blah, 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 blah. Well, you don't have to read the description if you're watching the video. I'm telling you now, go check the description if you want to see it in action. If you've been on the channel for, I don't know, any length of time, you've probably seen me use this Arcanine because I do kind of use it semi-often. I like it that much. So if you guys have any questions, as always, my Twitter link will be in the description below. You can hit me up there. You can feel free to write a comment. I'll try to get back to you, answer any questions you might have with this set. And, oh yes, also make sure you're leaving a comment, not just about that, but about what sets you would like to see in these types of videos. I have a couple planned out that you guys have been suggesting that I've been picking out from the comment section of previous videos. But if you have Pokemon that you want to see that I've used in battle, that you want to see a video like this for, just let me know. Because I do kind of tally them, try to like keep track of who, you know, says what and who wants which Pokemon, and I just go through the comment section when I'm looking to make a video like this, and I see who has the most suggestions, and I just go with that. So with that being said, I'm going to stop babbling, and I'll call it an episode here, and I will see you all for the next one. But until then, game on.